Today is a sad day for all hog enjoyers. Welcome back, guys. Although this video is going to be very quick and, well, very just dirty, as I say. Because this video is mostly just me giving literally my very first impressions of the ROADHOG rework. Now usually, I would at least play a few more games before I gave my opinion, because I've only played like 4 or 5. But I'm not gonna lie, out of those 4 or 5 games I was playing Hog, every single one of them felt the same, and it felt like this obviously, unfortunately, does not feel like a good rework. I really don't want to be saying this, but I really think this rework was a massive failure, and I would rather have the old Hog. Genuinely. And I just want to clarify, I do mean the no one-shot Hog, but still with, like, the old abilities. So, okay, first things first. Some people don't know what the rework is. Well, the rework's done a whole bunch of things. I guess let's just start with what isn't changed. Hook is the same as usual, and ult is the same as usual. Whole hog isn't changed. The only thing that might have changed is I haven't heard anything about this, but I noticed already in a couple of my games, both me landing hooks that I'm pretty sure were like too far away for me to land, and also me getting hooked from distances I'm certain were longer than 20 meters. It could just be that I judged it wrong, so maybe I'm just, you know, talking shit here. But there may be some kind of bug in the game where the hook is longer length than usual for some reason, potentially. If not, then maybe it's just my imagination. Either way, yeah, those are the same. What's different is, of course, we've got a new ability, Pigpen, which does this. Yep. And Pig Breather is now no longer, as you can see, on your E, it is now a right click. And it's on a resource meter. And of course, that also means that, naturally, there is no more right click on the scrap gun. Now, they did also change the primary fire to compensate for the fact that right click no longer exists. If I fire it, you're going to notice a difference. You're going to see those 4 bigger projectiles in the center. These are essentially added so that you still have mid-range damage without having to use right clicks. You can see you can kind of two-shot from medium range as Hog. And in fairness, that's on training bots, so maybe if you were going to get someone a bit thinner of a hitbox like Ash, maybe not. Yeah, maybe it's just an accuracy thing, but you can see it's a little bit less consistent on smaller targets, but yeah, definitely a lot less consistent. Yeah, so, okay. Essentially, though, the primary fire does a lot less damage up close. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still an insta-kill right there. But, actually, maybe Bastion's a better example. Before, it was more than enough to insta-kill, whereas now, it's only barely enough. Which means that a whole bunch of one-shots are gone. So, of course, as most of you know, all the way back in Season 2, they removed ROADHOG's one-shot. However, for those of you who missed it, they didn't truly remove it, although they did effectively remove it. Essentially, they removed the ability for Hog to just hook and shoot like that and get a one-shot. That didn't work. However, there were still ways you could get a one-shot that were more skill-dependent. The most well-known one, of course, was to be able to hook someone in front of you, take a step forward, and then shoot, which did give them a small window to respond, but if they were playing a character that didn't have an instant escape, like Soldier, then usually you would still get the kill. However, now that we have the reworked gun, it does less damage up close, and so it's almost impossible to even get the skill one-shot, because even if you walk forward, see, not enough damage. Just barely not enough. And that's a real problem, because before, because I'd spent quite a lot of time getting used to playing the quote-unquote shitty version of Hog, especially since I've always thought people have been too harsh on him and he's actually kind of a bit underrated. I've always, you know, I've had a lot of time to get experience with that, and I got to the point where as long as they weren't playing a character that had an instant mobility they would just mash the second they get out of the hook stun, that I could pretty consistently kill most characters in the game if I could get a hook on them just by taking a step and then meleeing. But as you can tell, it doesn't really work anymore. Unless you do something like that, then obviously if I had a melee on the end, that would kill. So yeah, that is kind of rough. Now, in fairness, that's probably because you got the new ability, of course. And the idea is, I put down a pig pen here. And there you go, now you got the one-shot back, but here's the thing. The pig pen, as you could expect, can be destroyed if they shoot it before it goes off. Although once it goes off, thankfully, it is invincible. Because it boops them up, it can make the one-shot a bit inconsistent, as you just saw, because it booping them up can make it so less of your pellets hit. Even though it is useful in most circumstances, obviously that's a circumstance where it's kind of not that useful. And on top of that, if I press this button, this is not a short cooldown. Don't get me wrong, there are longer cooldowns in the game, but 12 seconds is a long time to wait to get another pig pen. Whereas hooks, you can throw out every 6 seconds. So, you're having to wait twice as long to get your one-shots. Even with the quote-unquote shit Roadhog, if you simply had really good knowledge of how long you could get away with walking forward after hooking someone, you could still relatively consistently get one-shots on characters, so long as they were characters like Soldier or Reaper, nope, not Reaper, that means to restart. Characters like Soldier or Cass, who can't just like press a button and get out. You know, obviously it wouldn't work against characters like Sombra, who can just translocate, or Moira, who can just fade. Or, as I falsely pointed out, Reaper, who can just Wraith form. But as long as they didn't have an ability like that, which just the second they press it, they're safe, then yeah, you could still relatively consistently get these one-shots if you just got very, very used to the feel of how you're supposed to go about doing the one-shot. But, as I say, that's kind of gone now. It seems like the only viable way to one-shot now is to use Pigpen combined with your hook, which now means that you now can only get one-shots at half the speed you could before, which is pretty bad. But this is where things get really bad. Oh yeah, quick reminder, annoyingly the training range sets the health to the wrong values because they create it like open queue. Hog does still have 700 health, don't worry. But maybe do worry because the new Take a Breather is, frankly, shit. I'm gonna be real with you. I think there are many things wrong with this rework, but I think the biggest thing wrong with this rework is what they did to Take a Breather. And it's kind of sad because I don't think there's anything wrong with the concept. The idea is, hey, let's make Take a Breather a resource because it makes Hog easier to balance around. Part of the reason he's so hard to balance around is because Take a Breather gives such ludicrous survivability, probably more survivability than almost any other ability in this game, that it makes it so Roadhog can feel unkillable, and so that makes it feel like you have to use an Ana to counter him. But then the second you have an Ana, the fact that she just shuts off, like, Take a Breather, makes it so that Hog gets absolutely melted and just cannot fight back at all. And clearly this isn't okay. It's an imbalance of power where one side always has an extremely hard advantage. And so, making it so, Take a Breather is now something that you can choose when to use, on and off, with only 1 second intervals at minimum, with a resource meter instead, means that, of course, if you start using Take a Breather and then you get antied, you can just let go. And there you go, you get to maintain the rest of your breather and then use up the rest of it once the anti wears off. Stuff like that. Obviously, it means stuff like you can't get stunned out of it anymore, so you don't have to worry so much about Orisa Spear or Sigma Rock. But I'm not going to lie, I have some big problems with this. First of all, okay, I see where they're going with this, and I do think it's overall a good change, but I have to admit, I kind of liked that you could be stunned out of the self-heal. I want to make it clear, I do think it's a good change that now we don't, when we get antied, it's not just the end for us, but anti is obviously still strong against us. But, like, I gotta say, I don't like now that they've removed the mind games of having to hold breather for as long as possible and keep track of which characters on the enemy team have CC abilities that are able to completely cut off and interrupt your self-heal. Since that aspect of the game is just kind of gone now, I have to admit it makes it feel like playing Roadhog lost some depth. As well as that, man, the resource meter, it's so much weaker now. So obviously, if you weren't aware, Take a Breather for the longest time has had a property where you take half damage while using it. And that's why Hog is so unkillable. Genuinely, half the time I swear he gets more health from the 50% damage reduction while healing than the actual healing he gets. So that's a big reason why Hog has always been so hard to kill without anti-heals. But obviously, if they kept that 50% damage reduction while using the self-heal, well then you'd have the obvious issue of, then Hog just has a Fortify with a resource meter that also self-heals him that he'll just go on, off, you know, with, is the idea. And obviously that's really annoying. Now don't get me wrong, I see the thought process here, but I'm not gonna lie. you can see how long of a delay there is between each one of these. Like, I'm doing this as fast as the game will let me. Not to mention, it takes a second for Hog to even just put down, like, the vape after he started using it. So genuinely, I really don't think this resource meter is very strong, and it came with nerfs. The self-heal has been reduced in speed, even if you can hold it longer now, and the damage reduction has been severely reduced from 50% to 30%. That is a huge reduction, and ever since this change, Hog has gone from probably being one of the hardest tanks in the game to kill when being played correctly, to now what genuinely might be the new easiest tank in the game to kill. Seriously, I feel like I have an easier time surviving on tanks like Junker Queen than Hog at this rate. At least Junker Queen can escape using Shout and has a button to grant instant health whenever she wants that doesn't like shut down everything else she does. Whereas Hog, it feels like I peek my head out and then it's like, okay, I'm taking down, okay, I'm still taking, oh, okay, right, time to hold this and hold this and hold this and hold this and hold this, and oh my god, I still, after all that, I'm still like half health. I just use my entire take a breather and I still only have half my health and I'm out of resources and it takes so long to recharge that I'm dead by the time it's back. And that's awful. And this whole time you're walking in, you can't even be shooting them because you're too busy, you know, holding the breather. So, yeah, that doesn't get any of the pressure off of you and it makes things look really bad for Hog. So, yeah. Okay, this is kind of what I think overall with this rework. I think the big problem here is, okay, first of all, maybe not literally 50%. I could see it maybe needing toning down a bit, but honestly, I really think even 50% would be fine on the current self-heal with how weak it is. It feels so awful. And so I think that it really severely needs buffs. And if they're not willing to give it buffs to its damage resistance, which I'd understand that is a slippery slope, even though I think it's what would be best, I understand it's a dangerous game you're playing there. So if you want to play it safe, at the very least, you could make this recharge a little faster, man. Like, look at how slow this recharges. Now, if I remember correctly, it is 12 seconds of recharge. Bear in mind it only takes 3 seconds to use up the whole bar. It takes 4 times longer to regenerate this than it takes to use it. That is not very good. And also, similar to what they did with Sombra, I think they might need to work a little bit on making this animation of putting the vape away a little bit faster. Just because, well, I'm spam clicking there. It's like spam click starts now. That makes this rework feel really clunky, that there's so much downtime where you're just waiting to be able to play the game again. It's really frustrating. So yeah, I don't think this rework hit the mark. I think that essentially what this rework gave Hog, there's the pros and cons here, and I will give you the honest pros and cons, but I'm going to lay out why the pros are basically irrelevant. The pros of this rework is that now Hog doesn't get quite as hard as shut down by antis, even though he still gets shut down by antis. But more importantly, he basically no longer gets shut down much at all by CC, at least not any more than any other tank does. And that's probably the biggest pro there is. The other pro is that, of course, Roadhog now is much better at medium range. Which, I mean, I guess that's nice. I guess if I throw one more pro in, it'd be that technically this AoE slow on Pigpen, it's not weak. This AoE slow is a 40% slow, which might not sound like that much, but to put it in perspective, after the nerfs, May's slow is only 30% right now, so Pigpen actually slows enemies more than May does. So that should help put in perspective why actually slow is not insignificant. But here's the cons, and they are huge. One is Roadhog, a character who already, the whole reason why he became so over-the-top unkillable with Take a Breather is because he was such an easy target to melt down without Take a Breather having ludicrous stats on it. Considering that was already the case, this version of Roadhog genuinely feels like the most fragile made-of-paper tank in the game. You cannot hold anywhere. You don't have any shields, you don't have any way to just challenge any kind of sight lines. God, I thought it was bad when Malga was teased, and it's like, oh wow, playing Malga, it really felt like if anyone just played Soldier and stood on a bridge 5 miles away and held shoot on me, I was just screwed if I didn't have good supports. Oh my god, on Roadhog now it's like, I'm screwed even if I have good supports if there's just a soldier sitting 5 miles away holding left click on me. And it's like, well, what do you do about that? You can use cover, but you're the tank. You're the one who's got to be pushing in, so you can only use cover so much before you start throwing the game. So, yeah, it really feels like this version of Roadhog, and I can't believe I'm saying this, man, because already the version of Roadhog we had before was probably one of the worst culprits of the whole idea of how tanks now are punished for trying to make plays and rewarded for just sitting back and waiting. Literally, Hog, before this rework, was the epitome of that, I thought. I thought we couldn't get any more extreme than that. Because essentially, the reason why so many people thought Hog was awful when he was actually really good is because the way you play really good with him is you sit on point, especially if it's a payload, you can just crouch behind the payload and just stay there. Don't try and make a play, don't try and do anything, because you are nearly unkillable so long as you stay on your side of the map where your teammates are, and you have someone at the ready to help you if you get antied or stunned or whatever. You are basically unkillable if that's the case, and if anyone comes close to you, you have the best damage in the game. And that only stops being the case the second that they, you know, get a bit of a further distance away from you. Not to mention, you have one of the best tank ultimates in the entire game, and you can charge it real nice and fast by just spamming Take a Breather. So genuinely, it was extremely effective to just camp on point and wait for people to come to you as Hog. Because yeah, sure, usually people wouldn't come to you at first, because they'd be like, well, I don't want to come to you, obviously. Like, you want to hook me, and I'm not going to let you. But then it'll be like, well, you've been on point for a good few minutes, and if I just don't touch point because I don't want to come near you for long enough, then we're going to lose. So eventually, they've got to come to you. And that's usually how Hog has done amazing for me. It's just, you simply play really, really safe and really, really hide behind corners sort of style. And then the second they actually start pushing in to the point, well, now they're already close enough you can do good damage to them with your gun without even having to use hook. And that's great, because now that you can't always one-shot, that makes it so you're able to half kill them before you even need to use any cooldowns, because of course they came to you, and then once they start running away, well, you have your hook off cooldown because you didn't even use it to force them to come close to you, and then you can just pull them back in. And again, this felt good to play just in terms of, like, you know, it was strong, but of course it's not necessarily great for the game if it's like, oh, you're just not allowed to play the game. You know, the way you play Roadhog is you sit on point and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and eventually, once the enemies get bored of just waiting you out, they'll just charge you and do something stupid, and you press a button and they die for it. You know, it wasn't exactly the best gameplay loop to be the case, but that was exactly why I feel like Roadhog was underrated, especially in Season 6 and 7. But now, this version of Roadhog is so much worse, because he can't really survive on his own anymore. He needs so much support. He really feels like he is, like, constantly on life support. There is no moment where his supports, like, can stop pumping heal into him without just expecting him to probably get fucked. At least, I mean, in a 1v1 situation, obviously he can take care of himself, but obviously, as a tank, you're not usually in 1v1s. Usually you're in team fights, and you're the one taking the fire of everyone on the enemy team. And when that's the case, you basically need both your supports constantly pumping you through it full of heals, and be using your entire Take a Breather just to stay alive as Hog, unless you want to just hide around corners and never make space. So yeah, it's an absolute miserable dichotomy playing Hog right now, where there's no opportunity to make a play here. There's nothing you can really do. So yeah. And the old Hog, at the very least, while it was not exactly great, at the very least, you know, you could at least start chasing someone. Once they made a mistake, you could punish them and you could chase. But with this Hog, I don't even feel like I can get away with that. You know, with the old Hog, as if that was already bad enough, yeah, I have to wait for them to come to me, and yeah, I basically am not allowed to make a play until they make a mistake, like every tank is right now. But at the very least, once they make a mistake, I can, like, play aggressive briefly, and yeah, maybe I don't really get to choose when I be aggressive all that much, but hey, at least I have the option to make an aggressive play once they've made a mistake as a response. But the thing is, honestly, I don't even think you can do that with this reworked Hog. Your self-sustain is so pitiful that a lot of the times, I'll get someone low, and they'll start running away, and my hook will have just come off cooldown, and I'm like, I want to jump out, and, like, I know exactly where they're standing right now. I'm hearing their footsteps, I know exactly where they're going. I can jump out from behind this wall and hook them right now, and I will grab them, and I will kill them. But I won't do it, because I know I'm just going to die before I even, like, while I'm in the animation of pulling them in, and I won't get the chance to fire before I'm melted by the entire enemy team. It's just literally like you die way too fast. So yeah, and the fact that you have less damage up close also means you're not even that good at holding a point anymore. Because before, the main reason why Roadhog was so good at just contesting point was not only that he was so unkillable, which he's lost, but on top of being so unkillable, he had stupidly high damage if you got point blank close to him. And of course, this rework moved a lot of his damage to medium range. And don't get me wrong, from a pure design perspective, I think that's good, but in the context of this character and the one thing he was still good at, I think that was kind of an awful idea. Now it's kind of like, well, what does Roadhog do? And I think the answer is nothing. I really hate to say it, guys. I think that the current state of Roadhog, he doesn't do anything. Quite literally. The one thing I could say he's kind of good at is, oh, I guess, you know, he has decent mid-range damage. But, like, come on, look at the tank roster here. If you want mid-range damage, don't you want Orisa? Don't you want Zarya? Don't you want Sigma? I don't think you want Roadhog if you're looking for mid-range damage. Literally, I think the only thing Roadhog really has going for himself anymore is self-heal. And even then, the self-heal isn't actually good at keeping himself alive, it's only good for convenience when you get stuck in a spot where you have no supports, but you also manage to get out of the fight. Which doesn't happen a whole lot when you're playing one of the biggest targets in the game, and you have basically no defensive tools, and the one defensive tool you had gets giga nerfed in this rework. So yeah, I really hate to be so negative, but I do not have good things to say about this rework. Maybe things will change. Maybe people will figure out what we're supposed to do with this, you know, new hog. And maybe it'll turn out I was wrong. I'm not exactly averse to the possibility. It might be that I just spent so long getting used to the pre-rework hog that now I'm playing the new one. It's like, whoa, what the hell? This isn't what I'm used to. But like, I have tried to play him differently. I've tried playing him aggressively, I've tried playing him passively, I've tried using his pig pen defensively or like preemptively, or I've tried just throwing it at people, I've tried hooking people into it. And I'm not gonna lie, I just haven't felt much of a difference. It really just feels like, as Roadhog, I don't have the sustain to stay in the fight, and even when I show up to the fight, I just don't even do that much damage. And since I don't really provide any protection to my team either, unless I can hook someone to prevent someone from being killed by that enemy, yeah, it just really feels like I don't do anything as Roadhog. It feels like one of the only things I still have that does something is my ult, but he already had that before. His ult is unchanged, as I already said. It really feels like this is a massive step back. I will say, just to give some, like, fairness here, I acknowledge that it's easy for me to complain about this current rework, and it's hard for me to propose solutions. And in fairness, I couldn't think of a rework that I think is likely to happen that would work, I think. There is a rework idea, I think, that would be well designed, but it's just one of those things where I feel like it might be a bit too wacky and it might be something they'd never do. I feel like genuinely the best thing they could do for Roadhog is they should make it so that he is the quote-unquote shitty Roadhog that we have right now. Oh, sorry, we had until today, when he got his rework. He plays like that, except this is where he gets like the upper hand a little bit. When you hook someone in, you have the option to keep holding the hook button, and if you're still holding it once they're pulled towards you, then Roadhog would kick them away in the direction you're facing. And of course, because you can turn hook, that means that you could not only pull someone like off of high ground, but then maybe kick them behind a wall where the supports can't heal them and kill them while they don't have line of sight to the rest of their team. Stuff like that. I feel like even though that sounds very basic and maybe a little bit like goofy, at the same time, it's a simple and effective way to kind of put this character in a different direction, and it would kind of emphasize the one thing about Roadhog that's really cool. Well, two things, I guess. One of them being able to predict enemy movements, although a lot of the characters technically have that, but you know what I mean. And the other thing, of course, being using hook to put people in disruptive positions where they don't want to be. It's one of those things where, like, that's supposed to be what Hog's been about, but I feel like it's never really been what he's about, unfortunately. And I feel like the closest we've been is this, well, quote-unquote shitty version of Hog that we've had before the rework. Because now that you don't get the one-shot for free anymore, and you either have to do it with a really skillful setup, or you have to do it by, you know, putting someone in a position that's so bad that even if they don't get one shot, they still die before they could be saved, after you hook them, of course. Obviously, having the ability to not only hook someone towards you, but then kick them away in the direction of your choosing, obviously adds a whole lot more of that. Hey, now I can actually make sure that like the reward I'm getting isn't like just, oh, I hit this ability so now I get a free kill. The reward I'm getting is I hit this ability so now I get to choose where this enemy ends up, which if I'm smart leads to a free kill. Either way, that's about it. I know this is a little bit rambling, this is just very off the cuff. I want to get this out fast because, to be honest, I don't think I'd be making a much more well-produced video on this in particular, just because, well, I don't think it really warrants it, unless I was going to do a whole video just talking about how I feel about Roadhog as a whole, like, just everything about the design of the character, but that'd be quite a big video, and I think the last patch review I did was already long enough. So yeah, with all that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, and I really sincerely hope they give this Roadhog buffs. Thank you.